Okay. First of all, good evening, everyone. I'd like to introduce you, if you don't know, two of our city council members who have
Good evening, it is the old-fashioned way. Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much. My name is Dufour Wolfley. I'm a city councilman from District 2. And this is Henri Gardner.
I'm Henri Gardner. Good evening, everyone. At-large council member, City of Bowie.
We'd like to welcome you to the event this evening. We thank you all for coming out here today in person. We know that there are also a fair number of people who like to watch from home, and this will be recorded and available online as well. So thank you to all for participating in person and online. And we also would like to extend an offer to participate through questions, so please be sure to do so.
Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Councilman.
Oh, and I do want to extend a special thank you to the city staff that is with us today to make this possible. We have Una Cooper and Wilder Hernandez, two leads on the project, but there's a host of folks here that are helping out across the organization, so thank you in advance for their help this evening. And also a special thanks to Sue Rivera, who will be coordinating the questions up here and be speaking to you. And Gary Allen will be here, former mayor, he's here somewhere hiding, but we'll be taking your questions as well. So thank you very much to both of them.
Thank you all.
Again, good evening. I'm Sue Rivera, and I got roped into this. I mean, I was asked to do this as much because I've been involved in the city for quite a while. I'm a retired school counselor and had a keen interest in the schools, but particularly fair elections. So welcome again, and obviously there are not tons of us here, which is kind of nice, so you'll have a good chance to ask your questions as you wish. The questions, if you've written them down on paper, they'll be brought to me, and I already have a number, and after that, then you'll have a chance to come to the microphone and ask your questions then. I'm going to give a few logistics. We're not going to do a break, but if you need the restroom, you go out the door and to the right. That's where the restrooms are. Masks are required because we're in a school building, and that is still, until we reach 80% of vaccination, that will be the rule. Note where the exits are. If there's any problem, there's one there and one behind you, and that's the way we'll leave, but you'll be directed should there be a need. Regarding your phones, if you would please make sure they're silenced. You're welcome to take pictures, even record if you wish, but if you do take a picture, please turn off the flash. It can be very distracting. And, as Dufour said, it is being recorded, which should be available hopefully tomorrow, should you just wish to recount it. And there we have it. Now, the timer for this, Wilder Hernandez, who's down here in the front, has signs that only the candidates can see that will guide them in their time frame. And most of the questions, they'll have a minute to answer them. Wilder will give them the guidance of how much time is left to assign, and then at the 1 minute mark or 30 seconds mark, a beep will go off. So hopefully that will work. And we ask that the candidates try to hold it to that time frame. You know, they're loaded with things to say, of course. So, to begin, yes, please sit, have a seat, Dr. Siegel. What we will do is, in turn, beginning with the gubernatorial candidates to my immediate left, your right, they will begin each, with their running mate, they each have 1 minute to give whatever they want to say as a way of opening comments. So, shall we begin? I think, just try it. I don't know.
Hello?
Yep.
Okay, good. Hello, everybody. I'm John Barron, Democratic candidate for governor of Maryland. I'm here with my terrific running mate, Natalie Williams, who's a proud daughter of Prince George's County. I'm a former nonprofit executive. I've been an appointee of Democratic and Republican presidents. I'm running for governor because Maryland is not making progress on major problems that damage millions of lives, and we're offering fundamentally different approach. In education, more than a quarter of middle school students in our state can't read at a basic level. More than a third can't do basic math. Those numbers are no different than they were 20 years ago. And modern income Marylanders have seen stagnant wages since the 1980s as income inequality has soared. Our state can't just keep doing the same thing we've been doing for decades, rolling out one unproven government program after another and expect a different result. To make progress, we have to expand solutions that don't just sound good, but have been tested in the real world and shown to make a big difference in people's lives. I look forward to discussing these proven solutions this evening.
I think we could hear that. Maybe we could lower that a little bit. Is that a little bit too loud in the back? Is that too loud?
Perfect.
Perfect. Okay. Very good. Please come on.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Natalie Williams, and I am proud to sit here before you as your next Lieutenant Governor of Maryland. I am a native Marylander, born and raised in Prince George's County, and proud to say that Bowie is my home. For more than 30 years, I've been communicating on behalf of people in the areas of education, healthcare, workforce, public safety. For more than a decade, I've worked with state legislators from across this country, crafting policies and programs that matter to everyday people. For more than 12 years, I've been a Democratic Party leader. Just yesterday, I've been a mother of 21 years to a wonderful daughter who is a junior at the University of Maryland, College Park. And for 2 years, I've been a breast cancer survivor. So I know a little thing about challenging times, hard times, fighting battles, and winning. I joined this Barron Williams campaign to bring you better ideas, bold solutions that will work on behalf of the people of Maryland. Thank you so much.
Can you guys hear me? Okay, great. Sorry about that. Good evening, everyone. I'm Candace Hollingsworth, candidate for Lieutenant Governor, running alongside Doug Gastler, former Attorney General for the state of Maryland. I am so excited and thrilled to be here with each of you this evening to share our vision for Maryland and also to answer your questions, most importantly, because it gives us insight into the things that are important to you. I was a former mayor of the city of Hyattsville for nearly 6 years. I stepped down to start an organization called Our Black Party, where our intention is to support candidates and policies that advance a Black agenda. I am running for Lieutenant Governor because I believe there are so many issues that are pressing for Marylanders statewide, yet we don't have necessarily the leadership or the stamina to make sure that we see them through. And I'm excited to partner with Doug because he wants to make sure that we actually get to work on day one. And so I'm excited to make sure that this Democratic Party isn't just about winning for Democrats. This is about winning for each of you so that we can go home and say our families won, our communities won, and with that we all win together. So I look forward to the conversation this evening.
Hey everyone, it's an honor to be here. I am a Republican candidate for governor and the only candidate who's promising your freedom. I'm the candidate who has stood up against our current governor, filed suit to protect your bodily integrity, and have pledged to do that on day one. I will work hard for you. I'm also the only Republican candidate to put a Black agenda on my website. And my heart is to make sure that I empower the people. I would like to see power back to families, to make sure that you have your choices for medical privacy, medical freedom, power back to you as parents, that you have your choices for education freedom and education choice. You need to be able to have the money follow the child, and you as parents can decide where your children can go. It's working elsewhere. We can make that expanded here in Maryland. And I also believe strongly in making sure that you have your tax dollars. So I would like to see seniors keep their hard-earned tax dollars, make sure that we expand this newly passed, and I'm in the legislature, by the way, I'm a delegate, and to see that expanded, the new tax credit that was just passed. I see the signs saying, so thank you so much. Asking for your vote, coxforfreedom.com. Oh, Delegate Dan Cox.
My name is Jerome Siegel. I'm a bread and roses socialist. I'm running for governor. Bread and roses socialism is not scary. It's 3/5 Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. It's 1/5 Henry David Thoreau of Walden Pond. And it's 1/5 the pre-Marxian utopian socialists. Bread is really what most progressive politics is about, and we share that agenda with Bernie and Elizabeth Warren. Roses is what makes us really distinct. The way to get at roses is think about that bumper sticker. Nobody ever died wishing they had spent more time at the office. Okay, we're about time, we're about policies that will make it possible for people not to spend all that much time at the office and instead do those things in life that really matter. It's not hard. With creative policy, actually, we can give you Friday within 3 years, and within 10 or 15 years, we'll be able to get to the 3-day week. What you'll do at that time will be passion work, it'll be work that will establish your identity, and it'll change.
Thank you very much. We're going down the line, Mr. Gastler.
Okay. Hi, my name is Doug Gastler, and I'm asking for your vote for governor. It's great to be in Bowie. As I came in here just now, I passed Benjamin Tasker Middle School. It reminded me of the Beltway snipers and the case that I ran the Joint Sniper Task Force for, and how that was obviously a very telling event, but people haven't been this scared since that time about crime. And so we have 10 people running for governor. I'm the only one with a criminal justice background. I was assistant United States Attorney under Eric Holder for 6 years in Washington, mostly homicides. I was in the state's attorney in Montgomery County for 8 years, and then was the Attorney General of Maryland for 8 years, and fought crime the whole time, looking forward to keeping crime down, but making sure we keep justice up, because that's a critical part and component of it. It's great to see Delegate Holmes here tonight. Thank you.
Okay, good evening, everybody. My name is Brooke Leerman. I'm a civil rights and disability rights attorney. I'm a mom of 2. I am a state delegate representing District 46. It's great to see Delegate Cheryl Landis and Delegate Marvin Holmes here, my colleagues. And I'm so excited to be running to be your next state comptroller. I'm running for comptroller because the time for bold action is now, to really increase economic empowerment for every community. And that starts here, because Maryland can never be a truly great state until Prince George's County reaches its full potential. And after helping oversee our $50 billion state budget as a member of the Appropriations Committee, overseeing our Joint Committee on Pensions, after digging in my district in Baltimore, and after successfully fighting on behalf of people who've been wrongfully convicted or facing housing discrimination, I'm excited to bring my ability to get things done, to work with all of you, to create an advocate in the comptroller's office working for all of you. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I am Ron Watson, a former school board member, former county council commissioner, former district chair of the Boy Scouts for this area, former member of the House of Delegates working for you, and I'm honored to currently represent this community as your state senator. I'm here seeking your support for my re-election. I have worked for this community for almost 20 years, and I think we've done some fantastic things. I look forward to getting into those details as we go through this evening. Thank you all for coming, and I thank the city of Bowie for putting this together. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Rahila Ahmed, and I'm a lifelong resident of District 23, a product of our public schools, and hopefully our next state senator. For those that don't know me, I actually got involved in politics at a very young age. I was 5 years old when my dad first ran for state delegate to represent this area. He ran 4 times and lost every single time, but it was through the process of canvassing with him and hearing the plight of our people that I really felt I understood what it meant to be a public servant for our community. And so I decided to run for office for the first time at 18 years old against the political establishment to represent us on the school board. Although I didn't win the first time, I came back and we won. And so I had the pleasure of serving as our elected school board member for 5 years. And I hope to continue service, continue the bold advocacy that I began on our school board in the state Senate for us. And I humbly ask for your support and your vote. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you all. Before we move on, I want to make another comment, is that note that every candidate who has filed to run was invited. Obviously, some are not here for different reasons. But I also have a note that has come to you all from our mayor. Good evening. I have received multiple inquiries from city residents voicing concern about the appropriateness of the candidates forum occurring today. Many residents have inquired as to whether or not city resources are being used in any way to support political activity. As mayor, I'm seeking to avoid any appearance of impropriety or the perception that I'm attempting to use my official position to direct city resources in support of any political activity on behalf of myself or others. Accordingly, I will not participate in the Bowie Candidates Forum for Comptroller. And as a note, as of today, our mayor has not filed to run for Comptroller. Now we'll carry on with questions. And this is going to be a question for the gubernatorial people and for Brooke. And Brooke, if you want to start with this, what do you see as the biggest challenge in our state?
And how long do we have?
This is a minute. Yes. Oh, okay.
In 1 minute, I'd say I think one of the biggest challenges in our state was exposed during the pandemic, where we saw the pandemic really expose and exacerbated the huge disparities in our state, right? We have some of the most prosperous communities in the nation in Maryland, but we have far too many that have been left behind, neglected, disinvested in, and have faced histories of racial discrimination. And so it's really incumbent upon us to make sure that in the next 4 years, we use our resources in a way that truly uplifts all of our communities and leaves nobody behind, and closes the racial wealth divide, funds our public schools, make sure great facilities like this are able to continue and contribute to their community, and build up our Black-owned businesses, which closed far too many during the pandemic. So I really think that that disparity and that racial wealth divide is what we have to be tackling in the years to come, and I'm excited to get to work on that.
Thank you. Mr. Gastler, you will just continue down the road.
Thank you. I think, obviously there's a lot, but I talk about crime going down, I talk about justice going up. I was the head of the NAACP Criminal Justice Committee in Montgomery County in 1989, and we started working on diversity issues at that time. When I was state's attorney, we put every police shooting in the grand jury to make sure, so we didn't whitewash it and let the people in the community decide whether or not that was justified. We started the first drug courts in Maryland's history because we put too many people in jail, and we need to keep people out of jail and give them a carrot and stick approach to becoming productive members of society. I started the first domestic violence dockets. We need to make sure we protect women as we go forward. And obviously, women's reproductive rights is going to be a big issue when I'm governor here in Maryland because of what the Supreme Court is about to do. We started community prosecution to bridge the gap of trust between law enforcement and the communities they serve, and that will also happen in Maryland when we're governor. So we need to make sure that we keep people safe. It's the #1 function of government, but we need to, so we have to drive crime down, but we have to make sure we keep justice up.
Thank you, Dr. Siegel.
The biggest challenge we face in Maryland actually is the biggest challenge people face anywhere and face all time. We're mortal. We're going to die. The question is what happens during the years that we're alive? How do we succeed in living well, living honestly, and living authentically? And it's basically how do we deal with the fundamentals of work, time, money, and meaning. We struggle with that in this society, and we're getting it wrong. We've been getting it wrong for a long time, and time is running out for each of us. So the question really are things like, how do we end up spending our lives doing what we really love doing? How do we become people who contribute to the next generation? How do we contribute to the beauty of the world? That's the challenge that we face. And American politics hasn't been about that for a long, long time. That's what I call the utopian dimension. So that's what we're trying to bring back. And I wrote a book in this. I have a doctorate in philosophy, and I'm a very wonky guy who worked on the Hill.
Thank you so much.
Executive branch. But we can do this. And I'm trying
Dr.
to
Siegel, thank you. Mayor?
So you've heard from Doug about the importance of crime or addressing violent crime in the state of Maryland, and that Marylanders ultimately want to feel safe. There's another part of this when we talk about public safety that is just as important. I believe it's just as criminal that we have education systems that don't make sure that all of our young people are educated at the same level. It's just as criminal that we have healthcare facilities that aren't accessible to a wide variety of Marylanders, no matter where they live. Those are also aspects of public safety that our administration will work to address, and they go hand in hand. When we have people elected in government that don't pay attention to the needs of their constituents, you end up having situations where, for example, Howard County is growing significantly. Certain parts of Prince George's County are growing significantly. Why? Because people are escaping the places where they live because they don't feel safe or because they can't access quality and affordable housing. We want to make sure that Maryland is a strong state and a great state because it's made up of great communities. And that comes from two competent leaders working hand in hand to make that a reality.
Thank you.
More than 40,000 Marylanders fled our beautiful state in the last 2 years, in large part because the targeted lockdowns did not need to happen. We see that in other states. And the small businesses, particularly majority communities, were hit hard. Many businesses went out of business. Many people lost their jobs because of the Jabs for Jobs demands. I will end that on day one. I'm the only candidate promising that. The other aspect I think we need to address as a state is to empower parents. I talked about education. Well, we also need to make sure that our children can walk free, and that when we step outside our houses, we don't have carjackings and the dangerous neighborhoods that are coming from, in my opinion, in large part, policies that expand catch and release from the southern border, coupled with empowering agencies improperly in the policing. So we need to make sure that our police agencies are trained, well-trained, and given the money that they need to keep our communities safe, so that community policing is empowered, so that we the people have that right for protection in our community. And so those are some of the highlights.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I think the question was what's the biggest challenge? And I think that differs depending on which area in Maryland you're visiting. When you travel up north and you think, and from Baltimore, the Baltimore area, and you talk to folks there, they're most concerned about the crime that's ravaging their community. You know, when you talk to pastors and community leaders there, they want programs that actually help to reduce the crime. And so we're talking about wraparound services, so to speak, in order to make sure that, you know, folks are off the streets and you're giving them the opportunities to get a good education. We're talking about being in the right mental state in order to have hope for yourself that you can do and be better than you were yesterday. In other areas, education is a top priority for some residents of Maryland. And I see my time is up, so I'm sure Ms. Barron will pick up on that. Thank you.
Just for now.
Yeah, you can call me John, though. To pick up on what Natalie was just saying, we need to expand opportunity in Maryland. One of the biggest problems in our state is that the bottom 40% of Marylanders have seen stagnant wages since the 1980s as income inequality has soared, and our state has made no progress reducing our poverty rate in more than 3 decades. The American narrative of optimism and progress, a rising tide to lift all boats, does not apply to an astonishingly large part of our population. We can't just keep doing the same thing we've been doing for decades, rolling out one unproven plan after the next to try to solve it. We need approaches that are tested and shown to work. I'll give you one example. When I'm governor, Natalie's lieutenant governor, we're going to launch a partnership with businesses across the state to provide effective job training to every young adult in the state who wants to advance. If it's done right, job training can be extremely effective. It's been shown to increase earnings as much as 40%, but the key is to focus that training on fast-growing industries and to work hand-in-hand with employers who provide paid internships to the trainees. So under my plan, our plan, the state will pay for the training, the employers will pay for the internships, our economy gets skilled workers, everybody benefits.
Thank you. All right, now this will be for our senatorial candidates, and I'll give you a second, but it's about Prince George's County, which you would represent. What major policy issues have not been addressed? What do you think they are, and how might you tackle them? Rahila, do you mind beginning, please?
Sure, I can start. I think the biggest thing that we need to improve in Prince George's County, the reason that I'm running for this position is because we need to improve our education system. As you all know, I've served on our school board. Education is my heart. There has been some changes and some moves made in the legislature this session to reflect some positive changes for our school district, but it's not enough. At the end of the day, we still have a lot of appointments that will be in place from one politician in our county that's going to affect our school system. And for me, I think the most important thing is that our people need to be empowered. We need to make sure that we have a democracy in place that is working for our people. We need to trust that voters, that we know who we want, that we understand our values, and that we can elect the right people to the right positions. And so that, I think, is one big thing that is on mind for me. And specifically, I'll say, what I'm talking about is a full repeal of HB 1107 from 2013. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator?
Thank you very much. I think with respect to Prince George's County, the biggest thing we have to deal with is taking advantage of the moment. As bad as COVID was, one of the things we learned is that once we went to a virtual environment, so much money was saved. So much money was saved that we were able to provide tax incentives, we were able to reduce taxes, but more importantly, we were able to put capital money behind big ideas. $400 million is coming to Prince George's County's Blue Line Corridor. And I know how this community is about development, but smart development, making Prince George's County a stop along that Metro Blue Line, giving folks a reason to come here and spend money and preparing for when the Washington team leaves and what's going to go there. That is a big deal, and that will benefit each and every one of us economically. That will reduce our tax burden, and that's the position that I take, and that's where we have to go. We have to reduce taxes by smart economic development, high-end stores and retail, giving people a reason to want to come here. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're going to move to the next question. And in fairness to the candidates, they do not know what these questions are. So the person who gets to go first is always the one that, so I'm going to try to rotate that. So for this one, and this is just random, Mr. Gastler, would you begin? And then Dr. Siegel will follow. We'll come down this way and then go to Rahila and then Senator and then Brooke. All right, here we go. There are many immigrants in Maryland, especially in Prince George's County. Many families have undocumented members who are unable to retain counsel or get an immigration court date. What is your plan to support our immigrant community? And thank you.
Bueno, este es un gran problema aquí en Prince George's County in total Maryland. Some of you don't speak Spanish, so I'll speak English, and I say that because it's important to make sure that we welcome our immigrant community into our state. Look at the crowd here, the diversity here in Bowie, the diversity in Prince George's County. I happen to be from the biggest majority-minority county in the state, and it's what we need to do. The question was asked earlier, what's the biggest problem in Prince George's County, and it's making sure that we promote and defend and stand up our minority-owned businesses, and that includes the Latino community. When I was state's attorney, when I was attorney general, I hired members from all parts of the fabric of our community because we need to make sure our government looks like the people they represent. So I very, very much look forward to working with Latino communities as I have in government for the 23 years that I spent in government.
So I believe in a statute of liberty orientation towards immigration policy. Tell you the truth, my father was an immigrant, and my mother was first generation. I'll tell you a secret. My father came here when he was 24, and he falsified his passport to come in under his father's citizenship. His father had been here before. So technically, I'm a dreamer. Yeah, I am. I'll tell you something else. The United States is this big John Wayne society. Guns everywhere, right? And it's amazing to me that we have things going on like refugees in Syria, refugees from Africa, and Americans are afraid. They're afraid to let them in. This tough society, swaggering with all of its stuff from coast to coast, trembles at the thought that one person out of 10,000 from Somalia might commit a crime. It's a real shame.
Yes, Mayor?
I think our microphone decided to migrate. So, does that count against my second? Thank you. So in the city of Hyattsville, when I served as mayor, we made a number of reforms to the way that we did business and the way that we governed to make sure that we put our values into action when it came to making sure that immigrant populations felt a part of the community and a part of the decision-making that went on in the community. That includes non-citizens having the right to vote in our local elections. One of the things that I think is very important for us when we talk about immigrant populations, that we recognize that immigration doesn't have a single face. It doesn't speak a single language. And as a person who, I can't tell you where my ancestors are from, but I do think that it's important for people, everyone, to be able to share in a common history and to be able to be proud of the history that they bring to this country and to see their history and their contributions reflected, whether that's in our school systems, whether that is in how we do civic engagement, and in making sure that we have government services that are accessible to everyone through language, and that and that we make sure that we recognize that sometimes people aren't able to access the services that they need because of certain barriers. We will make sure that those barriers no longer exist.
I was privileged to begin my life down here in Tacoma Park, actually Hyattsville area, in a little place called Hamilton Gardens, Madam Mayor. And so I grew up with a very diverse friend group in my early years. And my parents have always raised me that way. I've spent my life as a 17-year civil rights attorney, defending the rights of the individual. And I'll tell you this, the reason America is great and that people from all over the world come here, and the reason we welcome the world, is because of the rule of law and no other reason. It's because we have rules by which we defend your civil rights. You don't find that in many other countries. And we will lose those rights if we just erase the border laws. So I believe in legal immigration. I believe strongly in advocacy for every single person who wants to come here. We actually just passed a bill in the legislature providing free counsel for those who need it. I don't necessarily believe in taxpayer funding that, but I do believe in access to counsel for everyone. And so I will obviously always support making sure everyone's civil rights are upheld.
Thank you. So I believe that diversity is the beauty of our country, and by extension, the beauty of our state. I think what's most important here is that we raise the awareness really of what it takes for immigrants to be settled here. I am a big proponent to anyone who wants to live here should be able to do so free of criticism, free of harm. And when we think about respecting each other's cultures and celebrating each other's cultures, I think that will make for a more beautiful place here in our great state.
I agree entirely with my running mate, and that was very well said, and I think I'm a very strong proponent of immigration. Immigration is one of the things that makes this country great. We're a nation of immigrants. All four of my grandparents were immigrants. I'm sure many people can tell similar stories in this room. We need to be welcoming now, but we also need are not just good intentions. We need programs that are actually going to help them to succeed in this country, that have been tested and shown to do that. Now, studies show that one of the main barriers to success for immigrants is the language barrier. It's very important to teach people to read and to speak English when they come. There's a program that my philanthropic team funded the evaluation of. It's called English for Advancement, that teaches immigrants English language skills, as well as job placement, job training, and so on. It was tested and shown to reduce the unemployment rate by about 10 percentage points and to increase earnings by about 15%. It's tested and shown to work. We should be doing these kind of things to make the path easier for people.
Thank you. Rahila?
Hi, everybody. So I grew up.
You will start your time over, Awilda. You're good.
Hi, everybody. So I actually grew up as the daughter of immigrants in a multi-generational home here in Bowie, where my home was with the land and ground for a lot of extended relatives, families, and friends that came here from overseas in Asia as refugees, asylees, and immigrants. For me, I think the things that we should be doing for our immigrants is that we should make sure that all of our immigrant community members are eligible for social supports and services, including things like pandemic relief, employment, education, and tenant protections. As a school board member, I helped lead and pass one of the most comprehensive reforms for immigrant students and families that involve allowing native language instruction for students that are immigrating to the United States so they don't have to overcome the barrier of learning English on top of a core subject area. Doing things like establishing a teacher pipeline and pathway for educators that are from international backgrounds. These are the types of things that I think we should be fighting for on the state level as well, and those are the things that we bring to the table as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You wouldn't know it by looking at me, but I am Scottish, part of me. And Watson is a very popular surname in Scotland. Let me tell you, I've worked on so many bills related to immigration in the last 4 years, I can't even rattle them all off. The bottom line, if someone is here paying their taxes, then they're entitled to some rights. They're entitled to some privileges. They're entitled to be able to take care of their family, their children. They're entitled to a good education like the rest of us. Yes, there are things that we have to work out to make sure the infrastructure is there for full support like all of us like to have. But make no mistake about it, we are a unique and diverse community, particularly here in Bowie, because of the immigration population, because of our diverse ethnicities and cultures. And we need to continue that and not be afraid that jobs are going to be taken, some of these things I hear. This stuff is fluff. What is important is that we're able to come together as one united community, work together and recognize that everybody is of value, no matter where they come from, whether they're born here or not. But if they're law-abiding citizens, we need to recognize that. Thank you very much.
Sir.
So the speaker makes us stand to talk, so, old habits. So this is a great question and a really important one because diversity really is our strength here in Maryland. And the district that I represent, District 46 in Baltimore City, includes all of the immigrant communities in the entire city. And so I've loved being an ally and an advocate and a partner with our immigrants over the years at the community level, and then at the state level, working to pass important legislation, including expanding financial aid for our Maryland Dreamers. And that's why Casa de Maryland has endorsed me in the comptroller's race. So 3 quick things as comptroller we could do. 1, make sure that we are funding our public schools and ensuring that we're having community school coordinators and reaching out to our immigrant communities and working with our English language learners. 2, working with our entrepreneurs. There are so many incredible immigrant entrepreneurs around the state, and we want to make sure they have access to state contracts, making sure that procurement dollars can get to those companies as well. And then, of course, number 3, building an inclusive office. The comptroller's office must reflect the diversity of the state of Maryland, and that includes our immigrant brothers and sisters. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And we're going to switch it up a little and talk about the environment. And there will be a different question for the governors, for Brooke, and for the senators. So I'd like to begin with Dr. Siegel, and this is going to be the question for the governors. And it is that the legislature has just set more ambitious goals to address climate change. How will you advocate for accomplishing them by 2035? Yeah, it's for all of the...
I've got my hearing aids on, and I can't hear the question. What am I going to do to make the environment good by 2035?
Well,
anybody who thinks that that's possible is dreaming. Listen, it's going to get worse. It's going to get much worse. The planet is more fragile then the scientists think, they're changing their view about that, the data is phony, the countries aren't living up to what they promised to live, to do. Everybody's afraid to enact a carbon tax, which means primarily higher gasoline taxes. We're going the opposite direction. Right now we've got a holiday of gas tax, which is just a sample of our dedication, actually, to cutting down CO2 emissions. There isn't the will to do it. It's gonna get worse, okay? And whatever we do in Maryland isn't going to affect it at all. If we meet all the standards by tomorrow, or we meet it by 2060, the Chesapeake isn't going to go up or down an inch, depending on what we do, because it's global. What we can do is model something for the whole world, a different notion of development. And that's what Bread and Roses is about. A way of being that doesn't depend on growth anymore. Emphasis is time.
Thank you, Dr. Siegel. Mayor?
I'm excited that I'm running with the environmentalists. So Doug is definitely going to have a little bit more insight on this particular topic than I will. But what I will say is that state government should always recognize the power that it has in terms of our buildings, our fleet, all of the things that we do in purchasing that actually can have an influence and an impact on our environment. Make sure that we are converting our fleets as we can, that when we are building new facilities that we are mindful of making sure that we are meeting green energy standards, that we are helping to support the growth of the green economy, that we are supporting the growth of workers in that green economy and providing access to life-sustaining wages, jobs that provide life-sustaining wages for a number of Marylanders. And in addition to that, we have to make sure that we are, sorry, the 15 seconds goes by so fast. We have to make sure that when we make policy decisions, that we're making those decisions with the vision of 2030 in mind, that we're not thinking about where we are in this particular moment, but rather that we say, what is the reality that we're trying to create, and let's make policies that shape around that and actually encourage that reality.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Cox, I know you thought you were going next, but I think we should go to Mr. Gastler so you do the team comment.
Well, thank you. When I was the Attorney General of Maryland, I was the head of all the Attorneys General of the United States, and we took on corporate polluters. I did 22 river audits here in Maryland to get the Chesapeake Bay literally and figuratively turned around. That was my issue as Attorney General. And going forward, since I have 45 seconds, we're going to get offshore wind off of Ocean City. We're going to have solar energy in residential, commercial, and public lands. We're going to create the infrastructure for electric vehicles. We're talking, the private sector is literally and figuratively driving that effort, and we don't have the infrastructure set up for electric vehicles, except right here in Bowie, where I was at SEMA Connect recently, and it's a Bowie company that is the second biggest battery company in the country for electric vehicles, so we have that going here. We're going to control sprawl, we're going to have smart growth, and we're going to make sure that we lead, and we're the East Coast leader like California is in terms of the environment and having climate change. I'm the only environmentalist in the race. I'm the only one with any experience in the environment, and I can't wait to be governor to help fight climate change.
Okay, now Mr. Cox.
So I was town council president, and in that capacity worked very much with Maryland Department of the Environment to secure our clean water supply and also to end the effluent into the bay. I'm a conservationist, so I'm the only candidate running who believes strongly in our environment but will never ban your cars. You're going to have the opportunity and freedom to go about with the vehicles that you have, and yes, we can improve those so that the efficiency is better. Let me tell you, I've traveled the world. You know, when you go to South America, you go to China, you go to Eastern Europe, we are the cleanest country on earth. So I think we need to put some pressure on other entities, such as working through state compacts and also through companies to say, let's make sure that other countries are cleaning up their environment at the same time we are. And when you focus on effluent in the bay, here we are, every single day dumping millions of gallons of effluent into our beautiful bay. That's going to end on my watch. That's a conservationist approach. That's enforcing the laws we have to make sure we have a clean environment. So
Thank you.
Thank you. So first I wanted to say Thank you to both Sue and Gary for the work that you both do in the environmental conversation. We don't have to look too far, ladies and gentlemen. Bowie has won several awards in the environment conversation. City Hall has won several awards. And so the John Barron, Natalie Williams campaign slogan is, let's do what works. So let's talk with people right here in our home, and work with them on making Maryland as a whole greater in the environmental conversation. Thank you.
You know, to pick up on that, Maryland as a whole has done extremely well on climate. We have led the nation in carbon emissions. We've had a 38% reduction since the mid-2000s, most of any state. The reason we've been so successful is because we're part of a regional initiative called RGGI, 11 states that we all put a cap on power plant emissions that lowers over time. It's legally enforceable, but we let businesses determine, the utilities determine how to meet those caps in the most cost-effective way. This is a bipartisan approach. It includes buy-in from industry. It's been very successful. Let's build on what works. Our administration will expand that successful approach that's worked for power plants to other industries, including transportation, which is a big source of emissions, through the transportation and climate initiatives. There's a budding initiative now. When I'm governor, we will immediately join that with the 3 other states, and we'll work to bring other states, additional states, big states, New York, New Jersey, to try to bring them into the regional initiative. Because we're just one modest-sized state, and if we work on a regional basis, we can have a much larger impact.
Okay, thank you. And now to the senators, I'm going to tell you your theme, but also give Brooke the heads up. She has nobody, that she can listen to first. So, Brooke, in the same line of the environment, you will go after the senators, but I want you to talk about the incentives that are available and how you might support them, for wind, solar, etc. All right, now for our senatorial people. You know that Bowie has a climate action plan, and our county is getting ready to pass one. There are all kinds of components of that. What element of those 2 plans, and they're pretty similar, would you go to bat for? Senator, would you begin?
Thank you very much. And let me just say, I've always been proud to be supported by the Sierra Club, and proud to be a co-sponsor of the Climate Solutions Act of 2022 that recently passed, where we set some pretty aggressive and practical goals for reducing, Maryland's emissions and greenhouse gases. In addition, I was glad to pass legislation to move the city of Bowie towards a net neutral posture by paving the way for a second solar farm. With respect to Bowie's energy information, I have booklets that our friend Gary Allen has provided to me, and I'm still making my way through them because they reflect some really good goals that I've only seen here in the city of Bowie to really put us as a posture. And I am not one to think that this can't be done. This is going to be tough work, but through legislation, we have the ability to be the forcing function and make this happen. So I thank you for that question, and I continue to want to be engaged in the dialogue to help make that happen. Thank you.
Y'all, we only have one world. We need to fight to protect it. We don't have the luxury of time. And I believe that we need to do all that we can to dream big and be bold in our decision making when it comes to the environment. My vision, I think, my bold vision would be by 2035 to make sure that we have 100% clean energy in transportation and 0 food and landfill waste. I think if we're able to get to these types of metrics, we'll be in a better space for our coming generations and for our planet overall. More information, if y'all would like to look up, I have an extensive platform on environment and also other matters. It's available at www.rahila.com. Thank you.
Okay, Brooke, the question reads, what will your role be in encouraging tax incentives for such renewable practices like solar, wind, EVs, that sort, to make them accessible for all?
It's a great question. And actually, the comptroller will make sure, and as comptroller, I will certainly make sure that we can make the tax incentives that we have accessible to all. But the General Assembly sets our tax incentive policy. And I was really proud to work this year on the Climate Solutions Now Act, and really proud to work with Martha, who's in the audience from Sierra Club, to make Maryland the very first state in the nation to ban styrofoam several years ago, which is the worst form of single-use plastic that we have. And I'm excited to be the climate comptroller, because climate change really is the existential crisis that we're all facing as a world. So 3 things I'll mention. First and foremost, our state dollars. In addition to state incentives, we have to make sure that we're spending our dollars, our taxpayer dollars and federal dollars, we're doing it in a way that builds resiliency, right? Let's not build a new school building unless it's going to be net zero, and also maybe have solar panels on the roof, right? Thinking through how we build for generations. We also have to make sure that we're using our procurement power to increase wind energy, and we have to build more transit and make sure that we're lowering greenhouse gases from our transportation sector. So I'm excited to do all of this in partnership with all of you. Thanks.
Thank you. Now, audience, I'm going to ask one more question, and then it's going to be your turn. So this is where you have your chance following this question. And this is a real good one. So I'm going to let somebody start, and then we'll move the microphone to the left or right. We'll see what happens. This is the question. Where do you stand on Maglev? If you're for it, why? If you're opposed, why? So who'd like to start on that one?
I can start. We all
Thank you, Rahila, and we'll go right down the line. Thank you.
I'm opposed to Maglev. I think our community has made it very abundantly clear that this is not a project that we want running through our district. And for that reason and for other reasons as it relates to environment concerns, with that, I am not in support of expanding the Maglev project.
Thank you very much. I'm going to give you a dose of honesty here. I oppose Maglev coming through our district. I am not opposed to the technology that could one day allow us to travel from Florida all the way up to Maine. That would be a huge deal. I've gotten on these in other countries like China. It's a big deal, but things need to be worked out. We have to look at the environmental impacts. We have to make sure nobody is uprooted. And if somebody is uprooted, how about giving them 10 times the property value so that they can really move somewhere else and be better off? That's what I'm talking about. And I say this because I'm an engineer, I'm a technologist. This is what I do, is to evaluate new technologies. But you have to always look at the unintended consequences of these things. I appreciate the community coming together, Sierra Club wanting to do environmental studies and those types of things. These are very, very important. So I am opposed to Maglev disrupting our community. But the ultimate objective, up and down the Eastern Seaboard, I stay open-minded, and I hope one day we'll be able to make that happen.
I'm opposed to Maglev in its current configuration. It's huge problems, and I also believe really firmly that public money needs to be for public transit. We have so much that we can do to build out our MARC stations, to build out our MARC lines, to make sure that our bus system is entirely EV. And Maglev in its current configuration is it's a non-starter because of environmental issues, because of the people that it would serve, its high cost, and because of the disruption to neighborhoods. I'll say in my district, for instance, where Maglev would stop, they want to condemn a piece of property that we waterfront property rather than making a vibrant new community there. So there's huge challenges and huge problems with the current configuration of Maglev, so because of that, I'm very opposed to it.
I adopt every syllable of what Brooke said. And my son works for a company called Hyperloop, which is Elon Musk thing where they shoot people through 850 miles an hour through tubes. He tells me that Maglev that technology is already expired. But we do need mass transit in terms of, we need the light rail from Branch Avenue to Southern Maryland. We need the purple line to be finished. We need the red line, and the governor canceled the red line and basically took a sledgehammer to the city of Baltimore. We need to get mass transit from Shady Grove to Frederick. We need to increase the MARC service. And we have to make sure that we have transit-oriented affordable housing around the different stops as well, so that people can actually get to their jobs. Where Brooke lives in Baltimore City, 1/3 of the people don't even have cars. So how are you supposed to get to work if you have no public transit? We need to make sure we circulate our buses. So there's so much we need to do in terms of mass transit, and Maglev would certainly not be on the top of the list as it plows through Prince George's County, doesn't even stop here.
Thank you.
When you're making decisions about the investment of public money, it's a question of priorities. It's not whether or not something is good or bad, it's how does it compare to other uses of the money? And that has to do with what you think the priority problem is. The priority problem that we face in the transportation sector is how does it bear on climate change? And the single biggest problem in the sector is the automobile. And what we need to do is transition and transition fast to electric vehicles. And the question is, how do we best use our money to do that? Now, what we're doing so far is a $3,000 subsidy. But if the electric vehicle that we're talking about is a $60,000 Tesla, $3,000 isn't going to do it. And it's going to mean that low-income people are going to be the last ones to have electric vehicles. Right? They'll get them when they're old used cars. So what we've got to do is bring low-cost EVs to Maryland, and we can do it. Because there's a Wuling Mini that GM makes in China that costs $5,000. $5,000 with a $3,000 subsidy for $2,000. The poorest people in Maryland could be the first ones to be using electric vehicles. So it's a question of how we use our money.
If you remember what Doug said, you mind raising your hand? You don't remember what his name, but I want to say, to underline everything that Doug said about the priorities for this administration, particularly as it relates to Maglev, and particularly as it relates to how we prioritize the impacts that projects like these have on the public and the communities that they go through. When we talk about building safe communities and strong communities, and we're talking about doing it not at the expense of justice, when we make sure that communities get the outcomes that they deserve, that is an element of justice. And for us, that is a thread that will go through every single decision that we make, whether we're talking about criminal justice and law enforcement, or if we're talking about transportation, we're talking about education or housing, or even how we do civic engagement. It's important that we recognize the impacts that one single decision can have on many, and that we make sure that we do all that we can to eliminate those impacts for those who will be the most harmed.
So I'm an all-of-the-above transportation guy, but honestly, the question was, do you support Maglev? And I'm going to bifurcate that into two parts. One is, do you support the idea? And the other one is, do you support the actual plan that's being presented? I don't know enough about the plan, and I'm hearing that the plan is a bad one tonight because of the way it's designed. I'll tell you, as a constitutional property lawyer, I have defended families from having their properties taken. I don't agree with, eminent domain unless, as my good friend Ron said, the senator said, that there's adequate compensation. Having said that, trains, planes, and boats and buses. I mean, I think these are things we need to invest in. Ultimately, the Maglev is something that is the part of the future, at least it seems, unless Mr. Gastler is correct that it's already obsolete. But I think that when you're looking at the concepts of high-speed transportation with trains through Maryland, if we don't have a piece of it here and find a way to make sure no one's harmed, then we're going to miss out on the economic development that Virginia's going to get. So I want to make sure Maryland prospers, and so that's what I'll be aiming at supporting.
Thank you. So in our administration, we are still looking at the Maglev and figuring out what is best for this community. But I'm telling you, for something that is so expensive and has the potential of affecting so many lives, uprooting so many families, I think that we do need to go back to the drawing board and figure out what is best for us. And I do agree with Senator Watson. If you're going to uproot me from my home, show me the money. It's real simple. Show me the money. Thank you.
Surprisingly, I agree with my running mate. I'm very skeptical of Maglev in its current form. It's extremely expensive. I mean, $13 to $16 billion is the projected cost. It's environmentally disruptive of communities. I would want to see the studies go forward. Maybe something could change, but it seems clear that we could invest those dollars in MARC service and other improvements, other kinds of transit that would be much more cost effective. I do support, our administration would support a strong east-west solution in Baltimore, presumably the Red Line. Again, we want to see that go forward. We support the completion of the Purple Line, in this area, which could be enormously important. And our way of procuring large infrastructure projects like this would be very different than the Hogan administration, which has gone way over budget. I mean, we've all seen the Purple Line is 4 years over time and more than $1 billion over budget. I'd love to talk about how we would do that differently, but my background is in procurement. I headed a $1 billion procurement program in the Defense Department.
I have to stop. Thank you.
And I've just been...
It's so hard when they have such passion. We appreciate that. And now it is time for our audience to be able to ask questions. So if you would like to come up to the mic, and as you approach, Gary Allen is here at this mic, or if you're on that side, you go to that mic. And the idea is that whatever question you have, that it be directed to like the group of candidates, except of course for the senators or for our comptroller candidate or for the gubernatorial. So would you like to start over there?
Sort of. I don't think that's all.
No.
Hello, can you hear me? Yeah. Does that one work?
Yep. You bet.
It's a very interesting.
Help us on the way.
You want to try this one? You got it, man?
Hello? Can you hear me now? First, I want to thank everybody for coming out. I'm a resident of Bowie, Maryland. And first, I want to address the COVID protocols. It's very important that even though we're moving through the pandemic, we still should always continue to keep it conscious that sharing of lights and the coughing and things like that, we should continue to try to remember to be proper in that stance. My first thing has to do with, I'm going to speak on transportation and in terms of the conservation of it and electric cars and things like that. It is important that we remember that. But right now on the highways, it's really crazy in terms of the way people drive. Okay, would you get to your question, please? Would you get to your question, please? We all have a lot to say. I know it's hard, but
Okay.
they want to hear your question.
It's not really a question, I guess it's more or less like statements and everything. So how are we going to invest in, children because of the pandemic, and in terms of social, in terms of resources, and building on children, because children really are our future. So how do we build that in? And then secondly, to Mr. Watson, we have all the development that's going on along the 301 corridor. How are we going to address that in terms of road development, infrastructure, and things like that? So that's it.
Go ahead.
Okay.
And we'll have, again, you'll each have a minute to answer the question.
Fair enough. Let me address the question about education and children, especially in this time of COVID. Maryland has been stuck on education. As I mentioned earlier, more than a quarter of middle school students in our state can't read at a basic level, more than a third can't do basic math. Those numbers, they haven't changed in 20 years. things are made even worse by COVID. One of the most affected, which have especially affected children in the early grades. They're behind, at least a grade level at this point. One of the most effective things that we can do, and one of our top priorities when we are elected, would be to launch a statewide tutoring initiative to address this problem. We would provide tutoring to every struggling first and second grader in the entire state of Maryland, because that has been tested and shown to move them up toward grade level early before their problems get serious in later grades. It's the most effective tool we have to address COVID-related learning loss. We're going to do this by recruiting people from the community, including retirees and recent college graduates, to become tutors for a modest stipend as a public service.
Okay. Was that addressed just to you? I'm sorry, I had a hard time understanding, or was this for all of the governor candidates? Okay. Natalie, do you want to have a, okay, Mr. Cox?
So before I became an attorney, I spent 10 years in private education. I believe firmly in making sure that the parents are empowered with your taxpayer money, with your dollars, to make your choices for your children. I think you're going to make the most effective choices, particularly when we have these options such as, when your school being locked down, and then you need to have an option of, do you do an online school with your school, or what if you have the option to find excellent tutors that maybe come from a private institution? Competition, I think, will drive everyone's education opportunities up, and will make sure that parents who care and are the closest to their children can discern what their needs are and make it happen. And when you have education choice, that always, everywhere it's studied, it always shows an improvement in everyone's education options, so, and in their test scores. And so I firmly would work hard to empower you as parents. And I think that would dovetail directly into generally the question of making sure that we support our families and our businesses during any kind of future pandemic, and I would certainly be there.
Thank you.
Many parents already make the choice to take their children out of public school because the public schools aren't good enough to begin with. And that's because we have not invested in them in the ways that they should. I'm the proud parent of 2 Prince George's County public students. My son is a junior at Eleanor Roosevelt. My daughter is a 7th grader in high school, middle school, which is currently split across 3 different locations because we have not done what we need to make sure that the public facilities are invested in the way that they should be. The current comptroller, who is also running for governor, denied making sure that we had funding for facilities in place so that Prince George's County students and students across the state of Maryland would be able to learn in the places where they feel safe and where they are actually supported. My goal is to make sure that we, as an administration, that we are, of course, are funding full implementation of the blueprint, but that we're also addressing the fact that young people in school today are still not being able to graduate with the basic level of literacy that they need to be able to acquire a job or to pursue their life's passions. That is something that needs to end. I am tired of saying the same story over and over again. I've said it since my kids are 5, and I know that there are many other parents who are just as frustrated as I am.
Thank you.
Last week, I made a 5-minute address to the Maryland State Education Association. When you came in today, some of you may have picked it up. I left copies of it. They're still by the front door. It takes 5 minutes to say it, so I won't be able to say all of it. The basic thing is, I taught philosophy of education when I was teaching at the University of Pennsylvania. I read the Kirwan Commission report, the blueprint, and it's 2 different things. There's a social justice component, which is the gold standard for America, and then there's stuff about the mission of the schools. In my judgment, this is the most impoverished document that any commission has ever produced dealing with public education. And I said that if I'm governor, I will do everything to implement the social justice, and I'll open a real conversation in Maryland about the mission of schools. And one way to think about the mission of the schools is in terms of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And in terms of life, one of the things is health. One of the things we should think about is whether or not the schools are contributing to the decline of mental health of children and of the family.
Thank you.
And please pick it up and read it.
Thank you.
Tell you much more than I can tell you in 2 seconds.
Thank you. I was the first candidate to come out for pre-K education, universal here in Maryland. We have the money, we need to do it. We also need that universal child care. We have the money, we need to do it. What we also have is something called the blueprint. Candace referred to it. And we don't have to sort of have a study. We have the study. What we have to do is have a Democrat that can actually win the general election so we can have the blueprint. And if we don't win this election, we don't win the primary, therefore we have a Republican for another 4 or 8 years, we're not going to get the blueprint. So let's start with that. I'm on the board of Gear Up. I'm on the board of College Track right here in Prince George's County in Suitland. I started Charm City Lacrosse in Baltimore City 12 years ago. I'm a mentor, I'm a tutor. My parents were both educators. The question's great because we need to work on education. We need to make sure we have SROs in our schools to make sure that schools are safe and too many young people are part of our juvenile justice system. Issues need to be stopped right there. We need to make sure we have a mental health professional for every 250 children in our schools so we keep them safe.
So I'm a public school graduate. I graduated from Montgomery County Public Schools, and when I moved after law school to Baltimore City and settled, I started looking at the schools where we would send our children, and I got really angry because not in a single school that I toured could you drink water out of the water fountains because there was lead in the pipes. At most of the schools I saw, you couldn't open the windows, and some of the schools, you couldn't get heat. I'm now the mom of a 3rd grade public school student in Baltimore City, and my son can't drink water out of the water fountains at his school. But I ran for office to make sure that future generations wouldn't have to deal with that, and our kids today won't have to deal with that. We passed the blueprint for Maryland's future to make sure that we are equitably funding our schools, and I'll say this current governor has not done that. In fact, just this year, the Baltimore City delegation and the Prince George's County delegation had to fight to get our fair share of funding, and we won and we got it. We're going to expand childcare and pre-K, and we're going to make sure that every school building that a child enters is worthy of that child. That's what we're going to do, and I'm excited as the next comptroller to make sure we have the money to do it.
And let me pick up where she left off. Prince George's stood to lose $26 million, and we did fight to get that back. Let me give you a unique perspective being a former member of the school board. You know, all of our teachers are trained the same way. They get the same credentials, certification. Our schools are pretty much the same. So to talk about schools as a structure is a little erroneous. We have to get to the root of the issue. And when you look at the root of the issue, I had a college professor that said, everybody stand in a line. When I ask you a question, take a step if this question appeals to you. You grew up in a 2-family home. You had access to a tutor. And when you asked all these questions, you saw a divergence of population. So the thought that these kids grow up and have equal opportunity is a fallacy. The issue is in the communities, and the issues in the communities make their way into the classroom. The communities is where we must have our impact. We continue to ask too much of our teachers. Their job is to teach, educate. That's their #1 job. We have asked them as a community to help raise our kids because we're chasing the dollars, we have broken homes, all of these things impact. I wish we could have a longer conversation about this. Thank you.
Ma'am, when you asked your question, I heard 2 different things. One was around the social emotional well-being of our students. I think personally, the most direct way to be able to address those is to make sure that we have mental health support specialists in all of our schools. And I have a track record of being able to propose budget amendments in our school system budget to make that happen. Actually, the year that I proposed, it was a couple $1 million for school psychologists to be in our schools. It was the only budget amendment that passed at that time. The other part of the question, or the other question I heard from you was around roads and infrastructure on the 301 corridor. I think that we must advocate for those funds, and I have a track record of advocating for those funds as well, specifically as it relates to school system infrastructure. But I'm hopeful that on the state senate I will be able to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next question, please.
Thank you. So I am a Prince George's County homeowner. Proud to live in Prince George's County, proud to call this my home. A lot of the issues that you are speaking of involving schools and roads trace back to property, home values, because taxes is what that comes from, right? So we have our home values, they're taxed, and then it pays for our schools, it pays for our bridges, it pays for our roads. However, Prince George's County while beautiful, is one of the most undervalued counties in this entire state. It has the largest concentration of Black wealth in the entire country. However, our homes are consistently undervalued in comparison to the homes in other counties. I can pick up my house right now, move it to Rockville, and it would be worth $100,000 more, just off of the fact that it's in a different zip code. Prince George's County has been redlined. How are we going to address that? Because we cannot fix our schools and we cannot fix our roads if we do not have appropriate tax dollars that come from our home values. Home value is the way that we get to the American dream. But Black people who mostly populate Prince George's County are being cut off from that American dream because our homes are being undervalued.
Thank you so much for that. And who would like to start? Go ahead.
Sure, so my colleagues, my colleagues in the legislature will have to correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we passed a bill this year to create more equality with appraisal evaluations in Prince George's County and other, among other issues. I believe it got through both sides of the legislature. But in any case, I agree. Home valuation is essential to making sure your community is strong. What I would ensure is not only equality, but I would also mandate, and I'm the only one saying that I'm going to cut the property tax rates. I'm going to create a valuation system that lowers the valuation process for taxation purposes so that you have more money coming in and not going out, and then also empowers the appraisal systems and evaluations for your actual home values to go up. I think that when you lower taxes, by the way, on property, on real property, it automatically builds in a frenzy of buying, which will increase your valuation, because we've seen this in other states. So that's the process that I would look at.
Thank you. Would you like to take it up?
Sure.
May? Oh, Brooke?
That's a great question and a really important one. This is an issue that's near and dear to my heart. It was named after Ed Brooke, the sponsor of the Fair Housing Act, and it's so terrible that decades later, still we are seeing devaluation of Black homes and consistent racism in the real estate industry. Which is why last year I worked with Senator Antonio Hayes, and we passed legislation to require a disparity study on racism in the real estate industry. And this year, Delegate Holmes passed legislation to do a task force to take that study and make sure that we are implementing policies that make sure that we are appropriately valuing Black-owned homes and homes in neighborhoods that are populated by people of color. Because at the root of the racial wealth gap in our country is home ownership. And we've sold home ownership to Americans as a way to build prosperity, but at the same time, we've devalued homes in Black neighborhoods. So it's a huge issue, and as your next comptroller, I am devoted to ensuring that we are tackling that racial wealth divide, and home ownership and devaluation of homes has to be at the crux of that. Thank you.
Thank you.
May I make a statement on that?
Yes.
All right. I was very honored to be the floor leader to introduce Delegate Marvin Holmes' bill, and it is exactly what they purported. But let me tell you, the objective is, if I have a house in District Heights made by Ryan Holmes, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, and I have the exact house in Montgomery County, 3-bedroom, 2 baths, the thought is they should cost the same. But when in actuality, there's a devaluation based on crime, based on the amenities in the area, based on the performance of the school system and all of those things. What we hope to find out is how we can really nail down those things that are causing the houses to be devalued. We won't know because it's a study. And then work to rectify that issue, because the lady who spoke is correct. The same houses in one community are worth less than the houses in another. And for some reason, and I think we know, but the truth will bear the facts out, that in our Black and brown communities, they're always lower value. And that's something we have to change. We change that, we raise the values, we improve our schools.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll go ahead. When I was president of all the attorneys general of the United States, we had the national mortgage foreclosure crisis. And I took on the big banks and kept tens of thousands of Marylanders in their homes and away from being evicted and foreclosed upon. And we need that attitude to make sure that we protect folks in Prince George's County and their home values. I started the first civil rights department in Maryland's history to tackle redlining, to tackle discrimination. I think the senator has exactly right, which is we need to make sure that we have great schools here and keep our community safe. When I was Montgomery County State's attorney, we had 13 murders a year in a county of 1.1 million people. People aren't going to move, and the values aren't going to go up if the community's not safe, if the schools aren't good. And we need to make sure that we focus on that. We have access to public health, access to affordable housing, so the other houses' values can go up. So there's a lot we need to do, but we need to make sure we get a Democratic governor. And I guess I'm going to just thank Senator Watson and Delegate Holmes and Delegate Landis and Delegate Leerman and those who bothered to show up here tonight, and my counterparts, Mr. Barron and Mr. Siebel, to show up because this is Bowie, and if you don't show up now, you're not going to show up later. I don't know what these other people had to do tonight, but they should be.
The problem that was raised is a real one, which is that more money is invested in the education of rich kids than poor kids. That's what I meant by one of the social equity issues that the blueprint does address. And with the blueprint, I said is the gold standard. It's because it addresses that. A lot of this discussion here is actually quite confusing wealth and income. Taxes are paid out of people's income. If people in Prince George's County don't have the same income as people in Montgomery County, if in fact you kept the tax rate the same and doubled the value of the properties in Prince George's County, you'd be increasing the taxes on those residents that they don't have. Right? You're not going to make things easy. You're going to make things worse. What we need in Maryland is a progressive property tax, otherwise known as a wealth tax. Right? So people with fancy homes don't pay taxes at the same rate as low-income people with modest homes. In fact, it should go be very progressive.
Thank you, Dr. Siegel.
At the top, we should be sucking it to the McMansions, and at the bottom, zero out property taxes.
Thank you.
So I heard two issues in the question that you posed. The first is about making sure that our homes are appropriately evaluated, and I'm very happy to hear about the progress that's made in the General Assembly to do that. And especially when we get to a point where we're able to actually enforce penalties on those appraisers who are doing those appraisals and have a pattern of behavior when it comes to appraising Black-owned homes or homes in Black and brown communities. The other part to this, and I'm going to go out on a limb here, but one of the things that's important to me when we move to a community, I'm originally from Memphis, Tennessee. I'm not a native Prince Georgian, but I tell you what, Prince George's County is my home. And part of that means getting to learn and understand what makes this place beautiful, what makes it what it is today. One of those things has been, and when we talk about the lack of funding and resources that our school systems need, that our county and state and city governments need to make sure we have appropriate roads, it's sometimes a heavy hand in Annapolis that thinks that Prince George's doesn't know how to handle this business. And I think it's important that we have leadership in Annapolis that recognizes the power of community self-determination and allows for counties and cities and municipalities across the state to make decisions on their behalf that will end up to make greater good for the communities that they serve.
Thank you.
Thank you for that applause. I want to address, I agree entirely with what folks have said about the need for accurate appraisals and the need to prevent discrimination in that process. Let me address the issue of the tax base, because one of the reasons we have a state government is the fact that there are communities that do have a lower tax base, that for whatever reason, but they have the same needs for excellent schools and excellent services and all of that. So the state is, the money that comes from the state has to be distributed in an equitable way, particularly toward communities that have a lower tax base. That's essential. Let me mention one other thing. It's not just a matter of money. In education is one example. Maryland saw a major rise in education spending during the 2000s, about a 40% rise per pupil after adjusting for inflation. It didn't improve student outcomes, as the Kerwin Commission itself found. This time, with new resources, we need to focus on education solutions that are tested and shown to work. I gave the example of tutoring before. There are also career academies, and high-poverty schools are very effective at increasing long-term earning. There are other examples.
Rahel?
Yes, ma'am, the question that you've asked is a very difficult one because in addition to everything that's been mentioned on the stage, this is a matter at its core of dignity. And dignity isn't something that we should have to fight for in the way that it's presented to us now. The thing that I can commit to is that we need to have fighters in Annapolis. It seems like we've had a couple on this stage. But what I can commit to is being a fighter for us in Annapolis so that we don't have to keep coming back to this issue of what we're worth and are we worthy. Because we are worth it, and we are worthy of it. So that's what I have to say on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, we'll move on to the next question, please.
Thank you very much. Got a couple of questions I want to ask you. First of all, it's really wonderful. I keep hearing everyone talking about what they're doing for the youth that live in Prince George's County and Bowie. I haven't heard anybody say anything about the geriatric community that lives here and pays those taxes and are afraid that they can lose their homes because the taxes keep going up. Now let's leave that there. The other thing is, school board, what is it that we can't get another high school in Bowie since we already have the land that's been allocated for it? Now, we've been told a lot of crazy things. Oh, you can't do it because it's PG County, and we can't, the people over there, they're poorer than you are. We're all poor. We're educational poor if the kids aren't getting educated right. That's what I'm here to find out about. All of this game, that's fun. If you're a senator, then let's talk about what you're going to do. Not about, in Annapolis, what are you going to do right here in Bowie?
And so, sir, is your question addressed to just
Let's talk about it.
Or to all of them?
Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it.
Thank you.
Because I was your former school board member and tried my best to get a second Bowie High School from your current mayor, Fred Robinson. And we weren't able to do that because there's something called state-rated capacity. You look at all the schools in the entire system and there's a balancing mechanism. We were just able to put together a P3 initiative to put 6 simultaneous schools to be built in the next 3 years. We worked on that for 2 years. There was only one member of the school board that voted against it, and she's up here on the stage. But we have 6 schools going into effect, and we have another P3 initiative about to come online where we expect we're going to finally get Fairwood Elementary. With respect to Bowie High School, I think we have an opportunity to take another shot at it once South Lake community is built out, Amber Ridge community is built out, Mill Branch community is built out. And when those things come online, I expect to see everybody here talking to your school board members of why we can't get another Bowie High School, because I think then we'll have the numbers. Thank you.
Thank you. Sure, I'll speak to that. Our appointed senator has mentioned that we have a P3 initiative, and I was the only one that voted against it. That's true. What that means, what we passed was basically $2 billion over the next 30 years we'll be paying to build 6 middle schools in the county, none of which affect this area. And so when we're talking, and I also am a strong proponent of using public funds for public buildings, and this is a corporate contract that we're talking about. And so when we're talking about building another high school, I'm going to tell you something that is not popular, that might get me in some trouble, but to heck with it. The situation with having another high school in Bowie is that representatives from Bowie need to overcome a barrier with other members of the county around perception of Bowie. Folks sometimes see us as elitists, they see us as rich, They see us as economically, financially wealthy, but they don't, if they came here and they saw the students that we're working with,
You're here to finish your
they
sentence.
saw, they wouldn't have a different perspective. But this is the barrier that we need to overcome, being very honest. Thank you, sorry.
Thank you. From this end, would you like to comment or pass? Someone else? Dr. Siegel?
So I think that was a great question. I wish we could spend the whole night on that question. That's so much closer to what I'm about than a lot of the stuff we've been talking about. I'll mention two things, right? One of the things that, by the way, I'm going to be 79 in November. I had pancreatic cancer and prostate cancer, so I know a little bit about getting older, okay? Now, two things. Time limiting law, right, which will change what we mean by retirement. Time limiting law will give people a right to tell their employer, hey, I'm going half-time, right? So you get to 70 and you don't have to leave the workforce. You can cut down your hours and still be there and nobody can punish you for that. So that's one thing, because people want to work and do things progressing into their 80s and 90s. The second thing is, if I wasn't here tonight, I would be at my book club, right? The average age in that book club is 75 years old. We don't spend a penny, right? We're reading the 1619 Project, okay? And the point is, education has to be, among other things, about how you can live well without money.
Thank you, Dr.
And you've got to love books in order to live well into your 70s and 80s and so on a library book.
Thank you,
That's
Dr.
the heart of
Siegel.
life.
Thank you.
Not this business of the
Dr. Siegel.
which is really junk.
Love that energy. Thank you.
We need to revere our seniors like they do in every other culture in the world, and we don't do that. All through my career, 23 years of government, I've taken care of seniors and making sure seniors are safe, but they're also revered. And by the way, you don't have to retire at 70. You know, if the mandatory retirement age in Maryland, we have you and the comptroller both past that, and you're running for governor, God bless you. And so, but we do need to do that, and we do need to make sure that Bowie has an adequate schools and a new high school. That's been an issue for years. I mean, I remember we were talking about this 8 years ago, and it hasn't happened, and we now have the money. In terms of the schools, the question was actually interesting because it talks about youth and seniors. And we need to make sure we have livable communities where our seniors and our youths can be together, so seniors don't have to move away. Governor Hogan actually just did a good thing, something I was talking about for a long time, which is to make sure we don't tax our seniors and we don't tax older folks, so they will stay here, so they don't move to Pennsylvania and Delaware.
Thank you.
So just to be clear, the General Assembly passed that bill, not Governor Hogan. But he's right. We passed legislation this year to make sure that there's up to $1,500 tax credit for any seniors in the state, 65 or older, who are making up to $150,000 in retirement income, because we know that we want to support our seniors here in the state of Maryland. And it's not just about taxes, though. There's so much more we need to do. We need to make sure that it's easier to get long-term care insurance. We need to make sure that we're implementing programs like the one in Baltimore City called Hubs, where you can do housing upgrades to benefit seniors to help people stay and age in place in their homes. Sometimes a home just needs to be tweaked a little bit so that a senior can continue living there. I have a mom with Parkinson's with dementia right now, so I've learned a lot about how our system is broken and the ways that the comptroller's office can make it easier for seniors to file their taxes, to know what they owe, to keep their homes, and to make sure that we're supporting our seniors and every Marylander as they age so that they can keep thriving. Thanks.
Dr. President,
Yes.
I would like to address the question about what we're doing for seniors. I agree with the tax relief that was just passed for seniors. But here's one other area. In the area of healthcare, we need innovations in healthcare delivery that have been tested and shown to reduce cost and improve health. For seniors, here's an example. There's a program that my philanthropic team funded to expand from Philadelphia to other parts of the country. It's called the Transitional Care Model. When older people are discharged with multiple chronic conditions are discharged from the hospital, about a third of them end up back in the hospital within 90 days because they didn't get clear discharge instructions often from the hospital, or they didn't understand them, or they forgot them. So this program, a nurse provides clear clear instructions when the patient leaves the hospital, visits the patient in their home, and accompanies the older patient to the first doctor's visit. It was shown to reduce unnecessary rehospitalizations by 40% and to save an average of $4,000 per patient in healthcare costs. This is the kind of proven intervention we should be doing statewide at every hospital system in the state.
Thank you.
So there are a lot of ideas, but your tax bill is coming due, and many people are going to be forced out of the state, out of the homes they've spent their lives paying off because of that rising tax cost. I'm the only delegate, only legislator to submit House Bill 1361, which will give seniors a complete property tax credit on their homes. Sadly, my bill did not advance, but I joined in with great members like Senator Watson, Delegate Holmes, and the Black Caucus Chairman, Delegate Barnes, who put in part of the legislation with my colleague Republicans to give senior tax credits on their retirement income, as you've heard. That was a bipartisan approach. It was a great step in the right direction. But the $500 to $1,750 that each one of you will get is not, it'll help with your property tax, but it's not going to do what it needs to do, and that is to give seniors that break they need to keep their homes. So I'm going to continue to fight for that, and as governor, I will use the Department of Assessments and Taxation to lower your property taxes.
Thank you.
I got into public office because I said earlier, I'm from Memphis, and I really wish I could be home closer to my parents. I'm part of the same sandwich generation as trying to care for my parents from afar while still trying to figure out how to afford college for my son. And one of the reasons why I got into office was because I wanted to make Highsville a place that my kids could always feel like was a place they would return to. Why would they return to? Because I was there and I was also a senior, and I could be there to support my hopefully future grandbabies at some point. All that means is that building great communities means that we are looking at intergenerational aspects of building great communities. That means that we are looking at providing tax relief like Doug has proposed in his plan for veterans and also extends to seniors. But this is the value of having local elected officials in Annapolis at this particular level. Because there's a lot of work that happens in cities and towns across the state to help build age-friendly cities. And to have someone in the lieutenant governor's seat or in the governor's seat who understands the power of local municipal officials and can work collaboratively with them to help support and resource those efforts. That's what this administration is able to offer Marylanders.
Thank you. Now we're going to move to you good?
No,
Quickly,
so.
All right.
So I want to take a slightly different approach. Both of my parents are still living, 82 and 83 years old, and my grandparents lived to be 96 and 98, I believe. What I know about senior citizens, not all of them want to be treated like senior citizens, right? So my parents are very active, and they want programs that allow them to stay young and be vibrant in their daily lives. And so I would encourage us to, yes, we want to have the tax credits and all of those things, but let's look at programs that add longevity to our seniors' lives, where they can also too live happier and healthier lives no matter what age they are. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We're coming to our last question I know we have loads of questions up here that are unanswered. I'm so sorry about that. But perhaps we'll get to it. Sir, please, your question.
Well, first I want to thank all the staff and moderators for managing this crew up here, and it was a difficult job. So my question is this, and this is pretty much to everybody. How would you ensure that education includes culturally inclusive curriculum for all students and is representative of our real American history?
Thank you. Would you, if you can remove your mask and repeat it, it might be easier to understand. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely.
Very easy. Here goes.
So how would you ensure that the education includes culturally inclusive curriculum for all students and is representative of our real American history?
Okay, would someone like to start?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, we did that here in Prince George's County through the, remember what I was talking earlier about this whole package of immigration reform for our immigrant students and families? This was part of the package. And so moving forward, ethnic and cultural studies will be a graduation requirement for our students. And that is something that I'm very proud to have led on our local board, in addition to some other curricular changes, including making sure that financial literacy is a graduation requirement for our students as well. And so I very much resonate with what you're saying. I think this is something that is very important, near and dear to me, near and dear to our community, and we should move that forward on the state level as best as possible.
I have a quick question that I've been sitting here for a while.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you. But they have not had a chance to answer.
Oh, I didn't know. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, just real quickly, this year in the General Assembly, I was the floor leader for a bill that expanded American history, development of content, standards, and implementation. And I had to pull it up because the goal of this is to ensure expanded American history includes African Americans, American Indians, Asian Americans, and Pacific Islanders, Hispanic Americans, women, and other groups as determined by the state board. And we hope that continues to go forth and gets implemented. It's very rare that as legislators we try to dictate what schools do, but we felt that this was very, very important.
Thank you.
And I was just going to echo what Senator Watson said. This is something usually the General Assembly doesn't get involved in what our curriculum does, but we passed 2 bills this year to do that. And one was this bill that Senator Watson just cited, and the other was legislation that made it out of the House, and I didn't follow it last night until midnight, was to improve financial literacy in our states. I'm running for comptroller. I believe it's really important that we make sure that people have the opportunity to become financially literate, whether it's at school or at homes or in sororities or fraternities or church groups or wherever. And as the next comptroller, that's something I'll be focusing on and advocating for. Thank you for that important question. I'm so pleased that we were able to pass this legislation this year and look forward to being an advocate for financial literacy and truly representative history curriculum in the legislature as well. Thanks.
Thank you for the question. I was sitting there thinking, I don't even understand the other side of that. It's like when I led the fight in Maryland, the statewide fight for marriage equality, and no one other statewide elected official was for it, and I ended up getting literally impeached for proceedings by the far right in Annapolis for writing an opinion recognizing out-of-state same-sex marriage. This is the same issue. How do you not teach the truth of your country? This country was founded for the people, by the people, and the people that live in this country, live in this county, and live in our state are diverse, and we teach the truth. That's what makes America great. That's what makes it different than Putin and his crowd. In fact, that makes it a little bit different than what's going on in Virginia. And so we need to make sure we have a Democratic governor that can win and actually has experience and done the job, knows how the levers of government work, so that we can make sure that none of that nonsense where they start not teaching the truth happens here in Maryland.
So that was a great question, and it's right along the lines of what I said earlier about my telling the educators that the Kerwin Commission report is great on social justice, and when it comes to the missions of the school, it's totally impoverished. So be sure to pick up the paper, the address that I left in the front. I said one way to think about the missions of the schools is in terms of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I said something about life and mental health of students and families. Let me say something about liberty and pursuit of happiness. On liberty, part of what the schools have got to do is teach people how to defend democracy. Some of that is learning our history, and that's why I was going to go to the 1619 book club tonight, because it blows me away how ignorant we are, how ignorant I am about our own history. If we don't know that, we can't have a vibrant democracy. So that's got to be taught, and it really is number one for this country. All right, on pursuit of happiness, one of the things that schools do, if they do it right, is open up for every student the inherited wealth that they have potentially of all the previous civilizations. Okay?
Thank you,
need
Dr.
education to unlock that vault, but it's been gifted to us from prior generations. So schools
Dr.
have to
Siegel,
equip students.
once again, I'm sorry. Thank
That's
you.
not what we said.
Frederick Douglass said that despite our struggles here in America, we're the greatest nation on earth. And I firmly believe that. I think when you look at Maryland, we have the great Frederick Douglass, right from our state, and we have Harriet Tubman. And both of those individuals, by the way, I'm sorry, they were Republicans. But one of the things that I do is I teach my children this. And for 10 years I taught school, and you know what I did in school? I taught them about the stories of Harriet Tubman carrying a gun to rescue people from slavery and lead them north. I told them stories about Frederick Douglass, who was one of the greatest orators that ever walked the land of America. And when you look at our history and you value our Constitution, I would take our kids and I would take them down to Washington, D.C., and I would show them all three branches physically so they could understand the Constitution, that this is their document, this is something that they own, this is a government of the people, by the people, for the people. And when the children understand that, they begin to respect and love their country again. That's what I'm going to do as governor.
Thank you.
Not only do they begin, not only do they begin to respect themselves, well, they begin to know who they are when you make sure that the truth about one's history and to celebrate their cultures, that is so important in our society today. You ask, how can we do that? It's simple for me. Don't leave it out. Don't leave the history out. The good, the bad, the ugly of it. We all need to be educated and for some people, empowered by it.
I couldn't agree more, and I would add that the United States is the finest example in the history of the world of a pluralistic society. People coming from all over the globe, different races, religions, ethnicities, sometimes warring in the old country, they come to the United States and form a common identity as Americans. All of that history should be taught. The history of all of the ethnicities and races that are our components in America should be taught, and it should be taught with the truth. There are terrible things in our history. Racism, slavery, the history of Jim Crow, that should be taught, as well as the undeniable progress that we've made over the past 50 years on civil rights. We should be teaching the truth in a balanced way, recognizing all of the individual components that make America what it is and make it so great.
Thank you, Mayor.
We've been having a little trouble with that making America great phrase on the stage this evening. But I wasn't going to say anything. However, I could not resist the opportunity to remind people that there is no one more patriotic in this country than Black Americans. And it's important that we recognize that this story, this fallacy that we talk about in needing to tell the truth and to teach the truth, I think we need to say it a little bit differently. We need to stop lying. The history that we have in our curriculum today is full of lies because we are not, and we are intentionally avoiding the reality and the great American paradox that our freedom is built on American slavery. And so I think when we start to commit to telling the truth, as in stop lying anymore about who we are and where we desire to go, I think then we can truly be a great nation that we claim to be.
Thank you. Barry? Okay.
Okay, so this question is for John Barron.
Can you speak more loudly?
Sorry, can you hear me now? Is that better? Okay, this question is for John Barron and Natalie Williams, and it's sort of a twofold business question. What are your plans for enhancing contracting for women-owned small businesses in Prince George's County in a meaningful way? And then second, what are your plans for continuing to fund incubators throughout the state, including the Bowie Bank?
Who would like to start? You got it?
Well, let me talk about, for women-owned businesses and minority business enterprises, I think the state needs to change its procurement process because it is not a level playing field. Right now, the incumbent people who have been these big companies that have been doing business with the state for years. They have people who know all the arcane rules of state contracting. They know the people in the state agencies and so on. We need to end single source contracting that makes that kind of relationship possible. And we need to make the procurement process for state services much more transparent and simple so that there's a level playing field so that minority business enterprises and women business enterprises and all enterprises can compete on a level playing field. Now, when I was the head of a procurement program, big procurement program in the Clinton administration. We did that very successfully, simplified the process, made it much more open and competitive.
Thank you.
So I'm going to take a more personal route. I agree with everything that John has said about leveling the playing field. I am, of course, a Black woman. I am also a small business owner, and I haven't always been successful in that for many different reasons. As a single mother who wanted to have better, be better, and had an idea and the talent to start a business, I ran up against many different pitfalls. I borrowed money from many family members. I used my home as a business, as a place of meeting. And so to support the incubator and incubators around the state, I would definitely be in full support of that. Not only does it allow people to have a sense of dignity and success that they are accustomed to, but it also allows us to pour back into the communities in which they live. And so I'm very thankful for that question. Thank you so much.
My wife and I have 10 children, and she has a small business, small little farming, with some meat and things that we grow on the farm, a little farm outside the city. And I'm a state delegate, but we don't have information enough, even with the access you would think that I have, to know how to even go about some of these programs. So I think, as you've heard, transparency is number one. To make sure that you know that these programs exist, to make sure that businesses and these small startups have the access to those loans and capital. The other thing I think that's essential is to make sure that there's continued support and encouragement, so that as a small business owner for 17 years, my experience has been you have ups and you have downs. You have some really strong years and then you don't. So on the strong years, there should be a program in place that says, look, we're going to make sure we're not going to tax you from that windfall. We're going to make sure that, yes, everyone's going to pay their fair share, but you need to have enough to reinvest in your company so that that company can grow and compete with these mega corporations from international sources that have so much money to play with, they'll crush the small business.
Thank you so much.
So thank you. That's how I would approach that.
So I think I got to address the issue of women and people of color's entrepreneurial activity at an earlier stage than just whether or not they get a piece of the pie. It's really a question of how do you encourage them to start entrepreneurial activity? Now, as a socialist, actually, I don't give the business community a blank check. I think a lot of what the business community produces is, well, I won't say it, but I'm not too keen on it, okay? What I do think addresses public needs is the nonprofit sector. And what I think everybody should be able to do as part of their education, and it goes to that question, what do you learn in school, right? Everybody should learn how to start their own nonprofit and raise money for it. So that should be part of education. And where does that money come from? Well, most of it comes from deductions, except most people don't itemize their deductions anymore. 85% of people don't. So we've got to change the tax code so it's a credit. So people take the standard deduction. Nonetheless,
please finish your sentence.
And a lot of money would flow into the nonprofit sector.
Thank you.
And public with the know-how.
That's a very long sentence, Dr. Siegel. Thank you.
Yeah, so look, I've been coming to Prince Georgetown my whole life. I'm 59 years old. I've lived here 50 years. And business and small business has been a problem. Minority-owned business, women-owned business, disabled-owned businesses have been an issue in Prince George's County. We have to start with education for the long term. That's how you fix it in the long term. In the short term, we need to make sure we have access to capital for small businesses. We need to actually not have minority business goals, but we need to have more minority business enforcement. And that's what we're going to do when I'm governor. We also need to have tech transfer. We have one of our 4 HBCUs here. We're going to make Bowie State, I've been talking about this for 10, 15 years, but we're going to do it once I'm governor, which is to have a law school at Bowie State to help support the school and make it a vibrant community around Bowie State as well. So Prince George is interesting. There's not one big city. There's a lot of small cities. I've got the best mayor in Maryland that just can't wait to be excited to take what she did with Hyattsville to the other cities and make sure she promotes minority businesses throughout Prince George's County.
Thank you.
That's a really important question. Thanks for asking it. So the comptroller is one of the 3 members of the Board of Public Works, right? It's the governor, the treasurer, and the comptroller. And the Board of Public Works holds the power of the purse in the state of Maryland, right? It approves all contracts over $200,000 for the state of Maryland. And so it's so essential that the comptroller is working to make sure that the MBE requirements are actually requirements, right? That the buck stops with the Board of Public Works. And so first and foremost, I'm looking forward to ensuring that our agencies, when they get to the Board of Public Works, aren't asking for waivers and aren't getting them. But there has to be more than that, right? We have to support Black women-owned businesses and make sure that as entrepreneurs they can grow and thrive in the state of Maryland through access to capital, through creating a revolving loan fund, through making sure that our contracts aren't so vague that smaller firms can't apply for them. And that's really about getting best value for our dollars and using our dollars to build generational wealth in the state. Finally, on incubators, it's a great question. I'm really proud to be working with a number of incubators in the city of Baltimore and just passed a bill to increase funding to TEDCO to do more support of our incubators and our startups. So looking forward to working on this with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. As a former executive board member of Maryland's Black Caucus, the largest Black caucus in the state, we've worked very, very hard to make sure as these big ideas come to fruition, we make sure we have carve-outs and have access to minority businesses to take advantage. Now, this is very, very hard. It's very, very difficult. By the time people like you and me hear about it, the opportunities are almost always gone. We have to do a better job of staying connected, stay connected with your legislators to know what's going on. We tried our best to make carve-outs for medicinal marijuana. Didn't work out that well. We tried to make carve-outs for sports betting, and we still have minority businesses waiting for those sports betting licenses to be distributed, and that was a year ago. And now we're getting ready to look at recreational marijuana, which is going to bring another form of financial stability for those people who are ready to access that opportunity. So what I'll tell you is stay connected with me so that I can let you know what's going on, because we need to have the conversation well ahead of time. By the time the general public hears it, you've missed it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Folks, oftentimes when it comes to business, there's a choice to make. Especially in the public domain, there's a choice to make. And the choice is, do you support corporations, big businesses, or do you support local and minority-owned businesses? It's a balance between the two. And for me, I'm always going to be on the side of local and minority businesses. If you're looking for somebody that's going to stand up to corporate interests, that's going to stand up to corporations, that's going to stand up to big businesses and has a track record of doing so, you're looking at that candidate. And so thank you for this question. I really do appreciate it. I'm here to support, and I think hopefully this is the last question of the evening for today. And so I want to thank all of the organizers as well for putting this on. Thank you.
Thank you. We've come to the end of the questions. And it is now time for the summary. And I will just add a comment from some of the other questions that came up. They want to know what your 2 priorities are, and then what distinguishes you from the other candidates that would convince me to vote for you. So, let us begin. Would you mind? You have 1 minute to summarize the evening.
Okay.
Or whatever you want to say.
Yes, this is the part where you hand it off to the first person and they freeze.
Right, exactly. Well, you know, you can give it to Natalie.
So she can freeze.
Yeah.
Okay, but that is, my time isn't up yet. Okay. I'm going to answer how we're different from the other candidates. All of the gubernatorial candidates share similar goals. We all want to improve education, jobs, reduce poverty. The way that we're different is this. Our approach is very different to achieving those goals. What they're proposing is basically the same old worn-out playbook of rolling out or expanding one unproven government program after another and hoping it's going to work. We have done that. We've been doing that for decades. I mean, 20 years from now, will our children look back at this time and say that we faced all of these persistent problems in Maryland, stagnant wages, stagnant poverty, stagnant education, and we just kept doing the same thing again and again? Or will they look back and say that at this moment, Maryland did something extraordinary? We pioneered a new governing approach based on solutions that aren't just well-intentioned, don't just sound good, but have been tested in the real world and shown to make a big difference in people's lives, and that we finally moved the damn needle on education and stagnant wages and health care and racial equity and other problems. That's the future I want for Maryland. I'm asking for your help to get us there.
Thank you.
Well said, John. I think what distinguishes us is that John and I both come from backgrounds that we've had to research and take a look at policies and programs that have proven themselves in other areas of the country. John, as a government reformer, my work with working with state legislators across the country, getting a bird's eye view of what is actually working. And so that's why this campaign is committed to let's do what actually works. We're about better ideas, we're about bold solutions, and we're about meaningful change that's focused on people, connecting people, and improving people's lives. So tonight we're asking for your vote, the Barron Williams campaign. Thank you.
So you can go to my website, coxforfreedom.com, and I'm the only candidate promising to restore your personal freedoms. I will never force jab you with the government experiment. Instead, if a government agent or any entity says that you have to receive their experimental vaccine for keeping your job, they're the individual that will face fines, not you. And we're going to also make sure that you have your constitutional and civil rights protected in every aspect of your medical care so that your privacy is paramount. Whatever happened to our American privacy in our medical decision-making and in our authority? And we're going to make sure our children are protected by empowering the parents through education choice. I'm the only candidate that's promising education choice, and I know how to get it done. I've spent 10 years in education. I believe in both our public and our private systems. I think that can empower and uplift all of us. And I will make sure that we focus on cleaning up our streets through empowering community policing and enabling you, the people, to say, these are the bad guys, these are the individuals we want off the streets, and so the state police is going to be empowered to help you to end this cartel warfare that we see going on. And I ask for your vote. Thank you very much.
I'm going to channel Brooke and allow you an opportunity to reset. First, thank you for the opportunity to share space with you this evening. There are two things that distinguish our ticket, and Doug will certainly share more. In my opinion, one is that we are the only ticket where both candidates for governor and lieutenant governor have executive level governing experience. The second is that we are also the only ticket who's talking about, we want to make sure that when you vote for us, that you actually see the results of what you voted for 4 years down the line. It's far too often we go into voting booths and we actually don't see anything for the votes that we cast. But the central message for our campaign is about safety and justice, and that is really important because I've talked earlier about the broad scope of what public safety means. But one thing that Republicans have done very well is that they are not particularly nice when it comes to talking about the issues. Democrats, unfortunately, I think we're getting too nice. And I think it's time for us to make sure that we apply pressure to the issues that are important to us, the things that matter to our communities. We get diamonds by applying pressure. We can apply pressure in how we make our communities safer, how we resource those communities, and do more for everyone that's voting for us.
Would you, Dr. Siegel, just let Mr. Gastler speak so they're a coordinated message, then you will go.
I'm going to say it again. Senator Ron Watson, Delegate Valentino Smith, Delegate Leerman, Delegate Landis, Delegate Holmes, Councilwoman Ingrid Harrison, and I think on the Gardner's here as well. We show up. And I think when you have a forum in Bowie, you need to show up in Bowie. I've been coming to Bowie my whole life, and I'll keep coming to Bowie. And talking about showing up, many of you met Candace Hollingsworth for the first time tonight, and she's going to show up when she's the first African-American woman lieutenant governor in Maryland's history. And that's what makes her special, how smart she is in her leadership and what she did for Hyattsville and then started our Black Party is what's going to make her special. But we need to win, and experience matters. Experience matters. I did 23 years in government. Experience matters because we need to know how to use the levers of government. This is going to be the biggest Republican year of our lives. If we don't get our heads out of the sand, we're going to have another 4 years or 8 years of Republican leadership. No one's going to vote for inexperience. Nobody's going to vote for people who are not vetted. We need to make sure we get to the polls and we win this election.
Thank you. Dr. Siegel, please.
So one of the documents that I left outside, and I hope you pick it up on the way out, is a policy agenda. It runs about 15 pages. I want to mention 5 policies that I haven't been able to talk about tonight. Let's mention them. First of all, 0 interest loans for low-income people for modest homes so that they can live mortgage-free, pay them off in 10 or 15 years. Secondly, a right to employment. I call it guaranteed basic employment, a legally enforceable right. Third, free public colleges. Fourth, a cap on medical expenses, limited to a half a day's work a week, 10% of your income. Above that, the government covers all your expenses. And finally, something that we don't really talk much about, which is taxes, right? How are we going to pay for all this, okay? Well, I'm very strongly in favor of much higher taxes on people at the top. And state governments are afraid to do that because the rich will flee to some other state. The answer to that is quality of life. It's to make the quality of life in Maryland for rich people and for their children so high that, in fact, they will stay here even if we double their taxes.
Thank you, Dr. Siegel.
At the bottom.
Well, I want to start off by just saying thank you. Thank you for showing up on a Tuesday evening. Thank you, Sue, and the council members for organizing this. Thank you for giving us the opportunity. This is going to be the most important election of our lifetime. And I know that every candidate says that every time, but it's true this year. Because for the first time in 100 years, every statewide constitutional office on the ballot is open. And there's an open seat for state comptroller for the first time since 1998. And I am so excited to be running for comptroller because I want to be present and proactive, working with all of you in every community around the state. Here in Bowie, in Garrett County, in Upper Marlboro, and Baltimore on the shore. I'm excited. I'm running a 24-county campaign, and I'm going to be a 24-county comptroller, making sure that the resources of the comptroller's office can uplift communities here in Prince George's County and around the state. So I ask for your support in the July primary. July right now, at least, in the July primary. And between now and then, I hope you'll join the campaign. We're running a strong grassroots effort. I hope you'll check out my website, BrookeLeerman.com, and join us so that we can make sure we're building a better Maryland together.
I started on my feet, I want to end on my feet. I want to thank all of you for coming. I wish we had more time to have more dialogue. And I present myself to anyone in here if you want to sit down and have a more detailed discussion, because that's how I get informed to make decisions on your behalf. Let me tell you, they're in the state of Maryland. The Judicial Proceedings Committee is the toughest committee in Maryland. And there are only 2 African-American senators on there, and I'm one of them. I have to represent Prince George's County. I have to deal with balancing punishment with opportunity. I have to deal with juvenile justice. And what am I talking about? I'm talking about young black and brown young men who need all kinds of support. And I need to continue this work for you. All right, it's nice when I get to deal with some business interests and those types of things, but coming from the school board, recognizing violence in our streets, we passed a very important ghost gun bill to get those off the streets. I've been in constant contact with Chief Nessie. 4 years ago, we had 1 ghost gun. Prince George's County has 275. Chief Nessie had 27. So I thank you for being able to represent you, and I'll be honored to continue. Thank you very much.
Folks, let me be honest. If it wasn't for our state legislators upending our democracy by allowing one politician to take over our school system, I would not be sitting here running for this office now. I would be happily serving on our school board and legislating and governing for our students. But because of our legislators' inaction to fully resolve an issue that they exacerbated 10 years ago, our children, our families, and our community is paying the price, and I can't stand for that. We deserve a leader that is unafraid to be bold and to stand up for what's right against the powers that be. That's the type of leader that I am, and I have a proven track record to show that. I'm a servant leader, I'm a fighter, you couldn't tell by the tone of my voice. And that's the kind of leader I hope to be for us in the state Senate. I humbly ask for your vote and your support, and I'll be here afterwards if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you all. We've gone over, and I appreciate your indulgence in that. I think we've covered a range of questions. We're always going to be more, there's never going to be enough time. On your way out, there is a handout, if you did not get it, that has a little more information, specifics about voting. Reminder that Thursday we have another forum here at 7 p.m. that involves the candidates for Maryland District 22 delegates and for the County Council at Large and District 4 seats. So with that said, before we jump up and leave, let's just continue to keep in mind the horrors in Ukraine, all that's going on in this world. Think of the subway in New York today. My goodness, we all must do something. So thank you all so much for each of you. Thank you, Rhoda and Emma and Gary, and all the folks that make all this stuff work. Really appreciate it. Hope to see you on Thursday evening.